Here is an interesting word that we often use when we are discussing the form or attributes of a certain thing. The most common or average occurrence or appearance of something that is around us. All of the words I've just used sound complex. However, they are not. The attributes of something refers to the appearance or the characteristics of one particular thing. Something average is seen as a mixture of what is common and apparent. An average thing is something you might see often or experience commonly. Today's word that we are going to focus on is typical. The word typical is often used when we are discussing the most frequent occurrence of something during a particular time. A common thing might be described as typical. An occurrence that happens frequently during a certain period of time can be described as typical. During a certain season, you might describe the most common types of weather event as typical. For example, a typical English summer's day. We might describe it as mild, sunny, with a gentle breeze. That, for me, is a typical English summer's day. Perhaps you might be asked to describe a typical day at work. What normally happens during a typical day in your job? Would you say your typical day is busy, or maybe the work is steady? The situation that occurs frequently might be described as typical. How would you describe your typical evening? In this sense, we are asking a person to describe what they normally do in the evening. What is your typical evening? When it comes to talking about people, it is much harder to use typical as a way of describing the average person. People are so different from each other. It is hard to single out a typical person. There are so many varieties and characteristics contained within the human race. It would be hard to describe a typical person. The phrase single out means to point in one particular direction and choose something as an example. You might single out an individual for criticism. Sometimes it might be unfair to describe a certain type of behaviour as typical. Sometimes it is possible to be prejudiced in one's view of a typical thing. We often describe this as a stereotype. We see one person behaving in a certain way, and then we associate that behaviour with other similar people, quite often unfairly. This would be described as a stereotype. The word type is often used to describe something that is fixed or embedded, normally in the form of text. The use of the word typical relates to something that appears to be common or of a regular appearance or behaviour. In nature, it is possible to use the word typical to describe certain types of animals and plants. The appearance and abundance of something that grows is often referred to as being typical. A typical tree, a typical sparrow, a typical flower. Many things in nature are fixed, and because of that, they can be described as typical. Something biological is constant. Each species is typical in its own environment. Synonyms of typical include usual, stock, average, normal, and commonplace. The appearance of something that is viewed as common might also be described as typical.